I still remember the sound before anything else. The high-pitched jingle of car keys tossed across the table, landing just inches from my plate. The metal clink cut through the air sharper than any insult. My sister leaned back in her chair, one arm stretched out like a queen at her throne, and smirked. "Guess who's driving to school in style?" she said, her voice dripping with the kind of glee only someone who thinks they've won can carry. I didn't answer right away. I simply looked at her. My fork hovered above my mashed potatoes, steam rising, the smell of fried chicken still heavy in the kitchen. The television hummed faintly in the living room with some game show my parents half listened to, but all of it blurred behind the rush of heat in my chest. She twirled those keys between her fingers, slow, deliberate, knowing exactly what she was doing. This is not just a story, it's a journey through betrayal, sacrifice, and the kind of revenge that changes everything. Don't miss a single second. Hit play and immerse yourself in the story now. Inside I wanted to shout. To slam my fists on the table and remind them, that fund was meant for me. Years of scrimping, saving, planning. All gone in a heartbeat so she could parade around town in a shiny new car. But I didn't. I forced a calm smile as if her little performance didn't touch me at all. And maybe that calm unnerved her more than my anger ever could. Because here's the thing she never knew. I'd been preparing for disappointment my entire life. People like me learn early how to hide their fire, how to tuck it away in a corner no one can reach. And deep down I carried something she didn't. Something no one else at that table understood. A secret that one day when the time was right would change everything. The clock on the wall ticked past 8, its rhythm far too loud for such a small room. The ceiling fan rattled above, pushing warm air in circles. My father cleared his throat, his eyes glued to his plate. My mother passed the cornbread basket as if nothing had happened. And there she was, my sister, leaning forward, chin resting on her hand, waiting for me to react. "Don't look so shocked," she teased. "Dad said the money was just sitting there. Better one of us enjoy it, right?" Her words stung sharper than the keys did. My throat tightened, but I swallowed it down. I took a slow sip of sweet tea, the ice clinking against the glass. "Calm. Always calm." "You're right," I said quietly, setting the glass down without a tremor. "Better one of us enjoy it." For a moment her grin faltered. Just a flicker, barely noticeable but enough. She wanted me broken. She wanted tears, screams, a scene. What she got instead was silence. And silence unsettles the guilty more than rage ever could. Later that night, long after dishes were done and laughter had faded, I sat at my desk, the yellow glow of a lamp spilling across the worn wood. The window was cracked, letting in the faint scent of honeysuckle from the yard. I opened my notebook, the one I never let anyone touch, and flipped to the page I'd marked weeks ago. It wasn't a diary. Not really. More like a map. Numbers, ideas, shifts I could pick up, possibilities I'd been sketching out quietly in case the day came when my parents failed me. Well, today was that day. I tapped the pen against the margin and began rewriting everything. My sister thought she'd stolen my future. But I knew better. Futures aren't stolen. They're built. And mine, though harder now, would be stronger for it. The next morning I watched her pull into the driveway, music blaring from the brand new speakers. The sun glared off the polished hood, blinding for a second. He honked twice just to make sure I saw. I kept sweeping the porch. She rolled down the window, sunglasses perched on her nose, hair bouncing like she'd stepped out of a commercial. "Want a ride?" she shouted over the music. I shook my head. "I'll walk." She shrugged, revved the engine and sped off, the smell of gasoline lingering long after she was gone. And that was the first clue. The first little seed that maybe, just maybe, all that shine wouldn't last as long as she thought. The betrayal didn't stop there. Oh no. Once she realized I wasn't going to fight, she got bolder. She'd leave receipts on the counter. New shoes, fancy dinners, weekend trips. She'd drop her purse with the tags still attached where she knew I'd see. Every move was a reminder. She had what was mine. But I watched closely. I noticed the tiny things others ignored. The way she never filled the gas tank all the way. The way her smile faltered when the credit card machine beeped twice before approving. The way she avoided my eyes when the subject of grades came up because while she was out joyriding I was grinding through essays by lamplight. Every clue was another thread weaving into a pattern I could already see forming. She thought she'd won. But life doesn't hand out trophies that easily. One Sunday I caught her in the hallway. She had just come home, perfume trailing behind her, keys jingling at her side. I stepped in front of her, blocking her path. She raised an eyebrow. Something you need? I looked her straight in the eyes. My voice was steady, my hands still. Just one thing, I said. Enjoy it while it lasts. For the first time, her laughter didn't come so quickly. She studied me, maybe trying to figure out what I meant, maybe realizing for the first time that my calm wasn't weakness. It was a warning. She brushed past me, muttering something under her breath, but I caught the flicker of doubt in her step. And that was enough. That night, I lay awake, listening to the crickets outside my window, the hum of the refrigerator down the hall. My sister slept soundly, probably dreaming of open roads and admiration. My parents, blind as ever. But me. I was wide awake, staring at the ceiling, plotting silently. Because while she smiled at her stolen victory, I knew something she didn't. I knew that one day the tables would turn. And when they did, she wouldn't just lose the car. She'd lose everything that came with it. I didn't know when. I didn't know how. But I could feel it. Deep in my bones, as certain as the ticking of the clock on the wall. And when it happened, I'd be ready. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, my sister's perfume still faint in the hallway, her keys jingling in my ears like a cruel lullaby. I had told her, enjoy it while it lasts, but those words didn't erase the weight pressing on my chest. If anything, they burned heavier, reminding me that while she sped down roads with a full tank, I had another shift waiting in the morning. So I pulled myself up, feet touching the cold wooden floor. My body already ached, but the clock glowed 4:30 a.m. and the diner opened at 5. That was my reality, no sleeping in, no coasting. Just dragging myself into a uniform that smelled of grease and coffee no matter how many times I washed it. The kitchen light flickered when I switched it on. I made toast dry because butter was for evenings when tips were better. My father shuffled past, half awake, muttered something about gas prices and didn't look me in the eye. My mother sat quietly with her coffee, staring out the window like she didn't see me at all. And I realized then, there would be no apology, no correction, no justice from them. If I wanted balance, I'd have to carve it myself. The diner smelled of burnt bacon and bleach that morning. The same regulars came in. Mr. Green with his newspaper, the 2 mechanics arguing over football, the truck driver who always ordered black coffee and 3 donuts. My smile was painted on, my feet already sore by sunrise. Long night. Marlene, the other waitress, asked as she tied her apron. She was older, hair graying at the temples, and she had a way of seeing right through me. Something like that, I said, forcing a chuckle. She nodded knowingly. Keep your head down, honey. Nights pass quicker when you don't carry them into the morning. Her words stuck with me as I filled mugs, balanced plates, and listened to the jukebox play the same tired country songs. I wondered if that was the secret. Pretend heavy nights don't matter. But I couldn't forget. Not when I saw the gleam of my sister's car through the window later that day, parked outside while she and her friends laughed over milkshakes. They didn't tip. Of course they didn't. I worked double shifts whenever I could grab them. The manager knew I wouldn't say no. By evening, my hands were cracked from bleach, my legs heavy as stone. Sometimes walking home, I'd stop at the bridge and just stand there watching the dark water roll underneath, cold air biting at my skin. I told myself, one more day. One more shift. Just keep moving. The nights nearly broke me. But in those hours, I also learned things I never expected. I learned how to carry exhaustion like armor. How to keep my voice steady even when my throat ached. How to smile at customers who didn't see me as anything more than someone to refill their cup. And slowly I learned patience. Because while my sister's world spun bright and fast, mine was slow, steady, deliberate. I didn't know it then, but those nights were forging me into something unshakable. One night, near closing, a man came in. He sat alone in the corner booth, ordered only coffee. His suit was wrinkled, tie undone, eyes hollow. I brought him the cup, and he stared at it for a long time before finally speaking. "You work a lot, don't you?" he asked quietly. "Enough to keep the lights on," I replied. He gave a dry laugh. "Funny how some people get handed everything while the rest of us." He trailed off, shaking his head. For a moment I thought he was talking about me. But maybe he was talking about himself. Either way, his words echoed. Not everyone who looks like they're winning really is. Sometimes the shiny car hides an empty tank. That thought followed me home. Meanwhile, my sister's nights were the opposite of mine. I'd hear her come home past midnight, heels clicking on the kitchen tile, giggles muffled through the walls. She smelled of perfume and cheap beer while I smelled of fry oil and sweat. Once, I saw her stumble in as I laced my shoes for the morning shift. Our eyes met in the hallway. Hers were glassy, mine red from lack of sleep. "Still working yourself to death?" she slurred, leaning on the wall. "Still wasting what's not yours?" I shot back before I could stop myself. Her smile vanished for just a second and I caught it, the tiniest crack. But she turned quickly, muttering, "Jealousy doesn't look good on you," before disappearing into her room. That exchange haunted me all day. Not because of what she said but because of what I saw. That flicker of doubt, of weakness. A crack in the glitter. The seasons changed. Winter came and the walk to the diner was colder, harsher. My shoes wore thin, the soles slippery on icy sidewalks. Customers grew meaner too, snapping over cold coffee or undercooked eggs. My patience stretched thinner by the day. One snowy morning I slipped on the steps outside and landed hard, bruising my hip. I lay there for a moment, snow soaking through my uniform, tears stinging my eyes. For a second I almost gave in. Almost let myself break. But then I thought of her. My sister, laughing, keys jingling, saying, "Better one of us enjoy it." And something inside me hardened again. I picked myself up, brushed the snow off, and limped into work. That night I circled new numbers in my notebook. More shifts. More hours. More sacrifices. Because if she thought she had broken me, she was dead wrong. What I didn't realize at the time was that the nights were not just testing me, they were reshaping me. Every insult from a customer, every bruise, every missed meal, every tear I swallowed alone, it was all sharpening something inside me. A blade she couldn't see, a weapon she couldn't touch. I stopped envying her car. Stopped watching her parties. I let her live in her glittering bubble. Because deep down I knew bubbles pop. And when hers did, I wanted to be ready. One evening as I counted tips in the back, Marlene sat beside me. She lit a cigarette, exhaled slow and said, "You remind me of myself when I was your age." "Is that a good thing?" I asked. She gave a crooked smile. "Depends. Pain makes you strong. But it also makes you cold. Question is, which one are you gonna let win?" I didn't answer. I wasn't sure yet. But as I walked home under the flickering streetlights, my breath clouding the air, I decided something. I wouldn't let pain break me. I'd let it mold me. Cold if necessary, strong above all. The nights nearly broke me. But they also whispered truths in the quiet hours no one else heard. Truths about who I was and who I was becoming. And one of those truths was this. She thought she'd stolen my future, but what she really gave me was an edge she'd never have. Because while she lived for easy days, I learned to endure the hardest nights. And when the reckoning came, she wouldn't be ready for me. I didn't have to wait long to see the first cracks. They showed up quietly, almost too small for anyone else to notice. But I noticed. I always noticed. It was spring, the air soft with the smell of cut grass, when I saw her pull into the driveway one afternoon. The car door swung open slower than usual, and instead of music blaring, there was silence. She stepped out with her sunglasses on, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. For a second she stood there, looking at the car as though it wasn't a prize anymore but a weight. Inside I overheard her on the phone whispering sharp and quick. "I told you I'd get it. Just give me another week." Her voice trembled at the edges. That was the first clue. Debt doesn't glitter forever. At dinner that night she barely touched her food. My mother asked if she was sick. She shook her head. "Just not hungry." My father went on about gas prices again. Nobody pushed further. But I watched her hands. They shook when she reached for her glass. I kept eating, calm and steady, because I understood something she didn't. Guilt has a way of seeping through the cracks no matter how hard you try to patch it. And once it starts, it rots everything it touches. The next week I came home late from the diner and found her sitting on the porch steps. The porch light buzzed overhead, attracting moths that fluttered and smacked against the bulb. She was hunched forward, elbows on her knees, phone pressed to her ear. "I can't," she hissed into the receiver. "I don't have it." Her voice cracked then, not the fake kind she used for attention but raw, panicked. She noticed me in the corner of her eye and quickly hung up. "What are you looking at?" she snapped, trying to stand taller. "Nothing," I said, moving past her into the house. But inside I was smiling. The glitter was starting to rot. Money wasn't the only thing unraveling. Her friends, the same ones who used to crowd around the car laughing too loud, draining milkshakes at the diner, stopped showing up as often. The driveway was emptier, the phone rang less. One afternoon I heard her door slam upstairs, followed by muffled shouting through the walls. I couldn't catch all the words, but I heard enough. "You don't get it. I can't keep covering everything." "No, I'm not asking her. Don't even suggest it." Her anger was real, but so was her fear. That fear stuck with me. Still, she tried to keep up appearances. She'd polish the car every weekend, scrubbing until her hands turned red, as if shining the hood could cover the rust creeping into her life. But the shine didn't fool me. One Saturday, while I sat on the porch with a glass of tea, she came out with a bucket of suds and a rag. She scrubbed hard, too hard, her movements jerky. I watched her from the corner of my eye. "You'll scratch it if you keep at it like that," I said quietly. She froze for a second, then glared. "Mind your business." But her voice cracked again, just barely. And I knew. She wasn't angry at me. She was angry at the truth she couldn't hide anymore. At work, I noticed things shifting inside myself too. The diner was still exhausting, the customers still demanding, but I no longer felt small there. Marlene would wink at me, saying, "Girl, you got steel in your spine these days." Maybe she was right. Because every night I endured, every insult I swallowed, every bruise on my feet, it all stacked up like armor. Meanwhile, my sister was shedding her glitter piece by piece, no armor underneath. I realized then that life wasn't just unfair. It was balanced in its own twisted way. My nights had nearly broken me, but they also made me strong enough to watch her crumble. One evening, I came home and found her in the kitchen with the bills spread out on the table. The overhead light flickered and she sat there with her head in her hands. Her shoulders shook, and for a brief second I thought she might actually cry. She noticed me standing in the doorway and quickly wiped her eyes. "Don't say a word," she warned, her voice sharp but weak. "I wasn't planning on it," I replied, moving past her to pour a glass of water. The faucet squeaked, the pipes groaning as I filled my cup. The silence between us was thick, heavier than any argument. When I set the glass down, I looked at her bills. Overdue notices, red letters, amounts far beyond what I knew she could handle. She saw me looking and slammed a folder over them. I said, "Don't." I shrugged, calm as ever, and walked out. But in my chest I felt it again, the quiet thrill of patience being rewarded. Her cracks grew wider over the summer. The car that once roared into the driveway now coughed, stuttered, and sometimes didn't start at all. I'd hear her turning the key over and over in the morning, muttering curses, slamming the steering wheel. The neighbors noticed too. Mr. Green from down the street asked me one afternoon, "Your sister doing all right? That car of hers sounds rough." "She's fine," I said with a small smile. Because that was the truth, she wasn't fine, but she was learning what it felt like to carry weight she couldn't throw onto someone else's shoulders. The day she lost her job was the day everything shifted. I came home from a double shift at the diner, my apron stiff with grease, and found her sitting in the dark living room. The only light came from the street lamp outside, cutting through the blinds in slanted lines. "They fired me," she said flatly, staring at the carpet. I didn't move. I didn't even set down my bag. I just stood there waiting. "It's not my fault," she added quickly, defensive. "They were cutting people, they said I missed too many shifts, but She stopped, biting her lip. Her voice trembled, her hands fidgeted, and in that moment, I saw it clear as day. The glitter was gone. All that was left was the rot underneath. I went to bed that night with a strange calm. For years, I had carried the ache of betrayal, the sting of watching her steal what was mine. But now the tables were turning, slowly, silently, and without me lifting a finger. She had taken what was mine, smiled while doing it, lived in her shine. But shine fades. And when it fades, it rots. And as I drifted off to sleep, I knew something else too. The reckoning I'd been waiting for? It had already begun. I realized it one late afternoon when a knock echoed through the house. It wasn't the polite tap of a neighbor, or the quick rhythm of a delivery man. No, this knock was slower, heavier, like each pound carried the weight of shame. I wiped my hands on a towel and walked to the door, already knowing who it was. When I opened it, there she stood. My sister. Her shoulders slumped, her hair unbrushed, makeup smeared faintly under her tired eyes. The car sat crooked in the driveway, one headlight out, the paint dulled from months of neglect. She wasn't holding her keys like a trophy anymore. She clutched them in her palm like a burden. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice thin. For a moment I just looked at her. The same girl who once smirked at me, spinning those keys in her fingers, now stood trembling in my doorway. I could have said no. I could have slammed the door. But instead I stepped aside. She came in, sat at the edge of the couch like a guest, hands fidgeting with the hem of her sweater. The room smelled faintly of lemon polish. I'd cleaned earlier that day, and the contrast was sharp. Everything about her felt messy, out of place, while the house felt steady, calm. Mine. "I need somewhere to stay," she said finally, eyes fixed on the floor. I leaned against the armchair, arms crossed. "Why here?" Her lips tightened. "Because you're my sister." The words sounded strange, almost foreign, like she was trying to remind herself of something she'd long forgotten. I didn't answer right away. Instead I studied her. She looked smaller somehow, not in size but in spirit. The glitter that once blinded everyone else was gone, leaving nothing but cracks. Finally I said, "You can stay. But not for free." Her head snapped up, eyes wide. "I'll pay you back, just until I find my feet." "No," my voice was steady, sharper than I intended. "Not pay me back. Pay me rent. $1,800 a month." Her mouth fell open. She let out a laugh, thin and humorless. "You're kidding." "I'm not." "You'd charge your own sister?" I tilted my head. "You didn't think twice about taking what was mine." The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. She opened her mouth as if to argue, then closed it again. Finally she looked down, nodded once and whispered, "Fine." The days that followed were strange. She moved into the spare room, the same one I'd once used for studying when the nights felt too long. Boxes stacked neatly against the wall, though I noticed how few things she had left. No new handbags, no piles of clothes, just the bare minimum. She kept quiet most of the time, slipping in and out like a shadow. Sometimes I'd hear her crying behind the door, muffled but unmistakable. Other times she'd sit at the kitchen table with her head in her hands, bills spread out before her, lips moving as she did the math. And every first of the month she'd hand me an envelope. Her fingers shook as they passed it over, her eyes darting away from mine. I took it calmly, slid it into the drawer and said nothing. Each payment was more than money. It was acknowledgement. Proof. Balance being restored 1 month at a time. But it wasn't just about rent. Living under the same roof again meant new tensions, quiet battles waged in the small corners of daily life. She'd leave the dishes piled in the sink, hoping I'd wash them. I didn't. She learned quickly. She tried to borrow my things without asking. My jacket, my mug, even a book once. Each time I placed them back in my room and locked the door. Boundaries she had never respected before were now walls she couldn't cross. And slowly she stopped trying. One evening we sat across from each other at the table, a pot of stew simmering between us. The smell of onions and thyme filled the room, the steam fogging the windows. "Do you ever think about back then?" she asked suddenly, her voice low. I didn't look up from my bowl. "All the time." Her spoon clinked against the ceramic. "I didn't mean to. I just thought." I set my spoon down, meeting her eyes. "You thought it was yours to take." Her cheeks flushed. She opened her mouth, then shut it again. Whatever apology she wanted to form, she swallowed it. The silence stretched long and sharp, broken only by the bubbling pot. Around that time I noticed the neighbors whispering. Mrs. Larkin across the street asked casually, "Your sister staying with you now? Must be nice having family close." I smiled politely, but inside I wondered how it looked from the outside. Did people think I was kind for taking her in? Did they think she was lucky? Or did they sense the truth, that this house wasn't a refuge for her but a reckoning? Either way, I didn't explain. Let them wonder. Work carried on as always. The diner was the same, the shifts long, the customers impatient. But when I came home, the air was different now. Heavier, charged with the presence of a sister who couldn't escape the fact that she was no longer in control. One night I heard her pacing her room, the floorboards creaking. Through the thin wall I caught fragments of her voice, on the phone again. "I'm trying. I can't just walk away. No, I don't have that kind of money anymore." Her desperation seeped through the plaster. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening. And instead of pity I felt something colder. Vindication. Because every plea, every excuse, every moment of fear, she had once handed those things to me without care, without shame. Now it was her turn. Still, there were moments that caught me off guard. Like the night she left a cup of tea outside my door, steam curling in the dim hallway light. Or when she folded the laundry without being asked, setting my clean clothes in a neat pile. Small gestures, attempts at peace. But I didn't let them soften me. Because the truth was her debt to me was bigger than rent. It was years of sacrifice, nights that nearly broke me, days of swallowing silence while she flaunted what she'd stolen. A cup of tea couldn't erase that. The tension between us reached its peak one stormy night. Rain hammered the roof, thunder rattled the windows. She burst into the living room where I sat reading, her face pale. "I can't do this anymore," she said, voice shaking. I closed the book slowly. "Do what?" "Pay you. Live here. Pretend everything's fine." Lightning flashed outside, casting shadows across her face. I stayed calm, my voice steady. "Then leave." Her lips parted, but no words came. She stood there, trembling, caught between pride and need. Finally, she sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. And I realized then she wasn't ready to leave. Not yet. That night, as the storm raged, I lay awake again. But unlike the nights years ago, I wasn't weighed down by exhaustion or despair. I felt steady, grounded, strong. She had knocked at my door not with triumph but with desperation. And now each day she lived under my roof, each envelope she placed in my hand, was proof of the balance shifting back where it belonged. The reckoning had walked right up to me and asked for shelter. And I gave it on my terms. But here's the truth I never said out loud. It was never just about the money. It wasn't about the $1,800 she slid across the table every month, her hand trembling, her eyes avoiding mine. No. What she owed me couldn't be counted in dollars. What she took from me had no price tag. It was my future. My chance. My dignity. And that debt could never be repaid. It became clear one ordinary morning. The sun was soft through the curtains, the smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen. She stood across from me, envelope in hand, her face pale. "This is the last one," she whispered. "I can't keep doing this." I looked at the envelope, then back at her. "You can't keep paying or you can't keep facing me?" Her jaw tightened. "Both." I reached for the envelope slowly, deliberately, letting the silence stretch. When my fingers brushed against hers, she flinched. That tiny recoil told me everything. She wasn't afraid of being broke. She was afraid of being seen for what she truly was. Someone who had stolen, wasted, and finally been forced to kneel to the sister she'd mocked. Later that day, I found her in the living room staring out the window. The car sat dead in the driveway, a rusting reminder of what she'd thrown everything away for. "You ever regret it?" I asked quietly, stepping into the room. He stiffened. "What?" "Spending my college fund on that car. The trips. The handbags. All of it." Her shoulders sagged, and for the first time she didn't try to deflect. "Every day," she whispered. I moved closer, watching her reflection in the glass. "Do you know what those nights did to me? While you were out, laughing, I was mopping floors until my hands cracked. I walked home in the cold with shoes falling apart. I ate dry toast while you ordered steaks. And through all of it you smiled. You smiled like it was a joke." She turned then, her eyes wet, her mouth trembling. "I was young. I was stupid. I didn't think." "No," I cut in. My voice was sharper than I expected, years of silence rising at once. "You did think. You thought I would break. You thought I would stay small. But I didn't. I carried every wound you gave me and turned it into armor." She crumbled then, covering her face with her hands, shoulders shaking. Maybe it was regret. Maybe shame. Maybe just exhaustion. But watching her fall apart didn't bring me joy. Not the loud kind, anyway. It brought me something colder, steadier. Justice. Weeks passed and the distance between us grew heavier. She stayed locked in her room most days, venturing out only when necessary. When she did, she was quiet, subdued, no longer the sister who filled the house with her noise. One night she knocked softly on my door. I opened it to find her holding a mug of tea. "I'm sorry," she said simply, her voice barely a whisper. "For everything." I took the mug, warm in my hands, and looked at her. "Sorry doesn't change the past." "I know," she admitted, tears streaking down her cheeks. "But I want to make it right. Somehow." I shook my head slowly. "You can't. Some debts aren't about money. Some debts stay no matter how much you pay." Her lip trembled. She nodded once, then turned away, retreating down the hall like a shadow. That was the last time she tried to apologize. After that, she handed me the envelopes silently, never looking me in the eye. Each one thinner than the last, until finally she admitted she couldn't keep up. "I'll have to leave," she said one morning, her voice flat, defeated. I looked at her across the table, the same table where she once flaunted her stolen car keys. "If that's what you need to do." She studied me for a long moment, searching for something. Pity, forgiveness, a crack in my armor. But I stayed steady. Because this wasn't about punishment anymore. It was about truth. And the truth was, she could walk out of my house, but she would never walk away from what she'd done. The day she left, the sky was gray, heavy with rain. She carried 2 small bags, nothing more. No friends came to pick her up, no car sat waiting. She walked down the driveway slowly, her figure shrinking against the storm clouds. I stood at the window watching. Not with anger. Not with triumph. But with a quiet certainty. She had once stolen my chance at a future. But in the end, she had stolen only from herself. The house was silent after she was gone. Empty but not lonely. For the first time it felt truly mine. Every room carried echoes of the past, but none of them weighed me down anymore. I walked through the halls slowly, my fingers brushing the walls, the wood cool beneath my touch. I paused at the spare room, now vacant again. The air inside was still but not oppressive. Just empty. And I realized then, revenge isn't always about destruction. Sometimes it's about survival. About standing tall when the one who wronged you finally collapses under the weight of their own choices. One evening, months later, I found myself at the old bridge on my walk home from the diner. The water moved dark and steady below, the wind cool against my face. I remembered standing there years ago, exhausted, broken, wondering if I could keep going. Back then, I had nothing but aching bones and a stolen future. Now I had more than I ever thought possible. Not wealth. Not luxury. But strength. The kind that comes only from surviving nights that should have destroyed me. And the knowledge that my sister, my betrayer, had paid the price in ways money could never measure. The debt she owed me wasn't written in bills or envelopes. It was written in every sleepless night, every bruise, every tear I swallowed alone. And though she tried, she could never pay it back. Because that kind of debt isn't meant to be repaid. It's meant to be carried. By her. Forever. As I turned from the bridge and walked home, the streetlights flickering on one by one, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because I'd forgiven her. Not because I'd forgotten. But because I had finally claimed what was always mine. The strength she could never take and the peace she could never buy. She thought she'd stolen my future, but in the end she only built the debt she can never repay. If this story shook you, subscribe for more powerful revenge stories that will leave you thinking long after they end. Your support helps bring more dark, emotional storytelling to life, and you won't want to miss what's coming next.